Actually, what I'd like is somebody should hold the microphone here, and people who want to ask a question should line up here. That's much more efficient than transporting the microphone around the room. So could you just stand here and hold the microphone? Here's another one.
Okay, my question is about the debate over net neutrality. And in this past week, there's been a special developments where there's a very strong chance that the internet will lose net neutrality. And what is the implication of that?
Well, network neutrality is one aspect of having, please, let's keep the microphone here, and people come now to line up. If you have a question, don't wait. Don't wait till I'm done with my answer. Come now and line up, and as soon as we're ready for the next question, you'll be able to ask. So I'm a supporter of network neutrality, and I think I know a reason why the FCC doesn't want to institute real network neutrality. And that is, real network neutrality would mean that the ISPs can't punish their customers on behalf of the copyright industry. So of course, that's what we need, real network neutrality. Are you about to ask? Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Richard, for the very inspiring talk. I mean, I think we all learn a lot from this. And my question is, I kind of get the feeling that I was trying to figure out why our society has come to the current state. As you're speaking, you point out a lot of issues that probably most of us aren't aware of. And I think the root of that seems to be convenience.
No, I disagree. The root of that, I believe, is plutocracy. The rich are buying the laws that they want. Our government is on the side of powerful businesses against the people. The convenience is something that the businesses have learned to use to herd people. They offer convenience in exchange for being subjected to their power. And people who aren't firm-willed in support of their freedom will make the wrong choice. But why is it that we don't feel the need to stand up for freedom? Of course, the media, the mainstream media are the corporate media, and they're supporting the values that businesses want us to have. Businesses would like us to focus always on the short term, so that for the long term they can manipulate us into giving up our freedom. A person who can't sacrifice a short-term desire for the sake of his freedom is going to lose his freedom.
So you don't really see inherent conflict between freedom and convenience?
We can have the same convenience and freedom, but businesses decide to offer us convenience at the expense of our freedom, and the mainstream media talk about the product or the service, and they only judge it by convenience. They never mention it. When's the last time you saw the review of a product or service say, it spies on you, it restricts you, this is bad? They don't mention that, right? So it's become sort of the custom not to discuss such things. So this means that most people get no help in thinking about these issues unless they come across us.
I see. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And when they do think about it, they tend to think, oh, but I'm alone. Yeah, I could reject this convenience service, and then my friends would sneer at me, and what good would it do if I alone reject it? Well, of course, if we boost this movement, you won't be alone. And what good will it do? You'll preserve your own freedom from some of the mistreatment that is happening, and that is a good thing. Even by itself, that's a good thing. So you should, for instance, refuse to be used by Facebook. You should not carry a personal tracking and surveillance device. You should not have a computer with non-free software. These things are a way you can defend part of your own freedom by yourself. Of course, we can't fully defend our freedom by separate action. We have to unite and act politically. If we want to stop the IDs and the train cards, we have to fight as a movement.
Okay, my question is, as a professor in MIT, what makes you start the FSF Foundation?
Well, first of all, I've never been a professor. I'm not a professor. Well, I'm an honorary professor at some universities in South America, but I never had the job of being a professor. My job at MIT was developing operating systems. And when our community, our free software community that existed in the 1970s died, yeah, the community was wiped out. If you read the last chapter of the book Hackers by Steve Levy, or at greater length, it's presented in my semi-autobiography, Free is in Freedom, second edition, which is available from the Free Software Foundation, where I corrected the errors. There were lots of factual errors in the first edition. In any case, that explains what happened, how the community died, and after that, the only useful thing I could do was to build a new community, and that's what I did with the free software movement.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stallman. I have two questions. First is, GNU is short for GNU is not Unix. So
GNU is short for, it stands for
Oh, right.
GNU is not Unix. It's
So
pronounced GNU.
So is that a recursive definition?
What did you say?
Recursive definition. GNU is short for GNU is not Unix.
Yeah.
And second question is, what do you think about the recent bug of OpenSSL, namely Heartbleed? I think it's a shame on the whole open source community.
There is no open source community.
Oh, right.
What we have is the free software community.
Free software community.
But as in many communities, people in this community have different political views. Some of us are supporters of the free software movement, and some, like Mr. Torvalds, are not. And they support open source instead. So they made the argument that open source software will have fewer bugs. Maybe that's true, but that doesn't mean it will have 0 bugs. But we don't make that argument. We don't say that you should use free software because it'll have fewer bugs. Because that's a weak argument. That's a side issue. Of course, I'd rather have a program with fewer bugs, but there are more important things than that. Besides, even proprietary developers try to make fewer bugs. They try to fix bugs. What they fail to do is respect our freedom. So I say, insist on free software so that you don't have somebody mistreating and oppressing you through your software.
Thank you, Mr.
Now, the fact that OpenSSL had this bug doesn't invalidate anything we say.
I think
It doesn't invalidate anything we say, right? It may invalidate or partly weaken some things that some other people say, but not what we say.
will encourage the freedoms of
We what, the freedom?
freedom of
Sorry, I couldn't hear this. We something the freedom. OpenSSL had a bug because nobody's perfect and non-trivial programs have bugs. That's just life. Proprietary programs have bugs too, you know. The difference is, with a free program, if it has a bug, you are free to fix it. And with a proprietary program, when it has a bug or a malicious functionality, you are blocked from fixing it.
But I think this is a childish bug.
What? I
thousand-
can't understand these words, I'm sorry. Maybe you
Yeah.
should have someone translate for you, because I can't understand what you're trying to say.
I mean, this bug,
I can't understand that. Ask someone to translate for you, I'm serious, because you say many things and I have no idea what words they are. So ask someone to translate for you.
thank you.
But he can translate for you.
Okay,
Meanwhile, he can ask, you can come back.
okay. Thank you for that amazing speech. I can truly say that I connected with every point that you mentioned, especially the part where you made your suggestions. I can connect with it because in everything that you mentioned, I also am trying to do the same thing. I don't have a phone. I probably am the second person that says, yeah, I don't have a phone. I think it's a better life. I can say it's a better life. My question is, you say that school is the best. I mean, the school is the best place where we can start. You
I
say
don't know if I'd say that. I'd say the schools have a lot of influence. What schools choose to teach has an effect on society. So it's very important for schools to be teaching good things and not bad things, which is not exactly the same as what you just, the way you just repeated.
that's right. But you said that schools, like you mentioned the example with the reverse engineering and stuff like that. Nobody's doing it. Nobody wants to.
Well,
do
you
it.
gotta start it.
Who?
I don't know.
Students, right?
That's a thing I
Students, right?
can't come up with. By the way, could the people who were selling things go back to selling so that as people leave, they have a chance to buy? So can you find those people and ask them to resume now so that they, oh good. So the FSF merchandise is still for sale there. The money goes to the FSF. Anyway, so, yeah, I mean, I can't give you a magic solution, because partly I don't know, right? And besides, we're talking about doing things locally, and that depends on the situation locally, which I don't know. I think it would be good to start meeting with other people here to organize a free software activist group, which is different from a user group. A user group tries to help users, which is a useful thing to do. I hope you have a gnu+linux user group. But I'm talking about an activist group, which is people who are going to work together to campaign for the school to move away from proprietary software. And of course, it would be good for people to campaign against putting ID in the train cards. That's tyranny.
Thank you for that suggestion. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Stallman.
Would you like to help start this activist group?
I will.
Okay, let's talk to them.
Hi, Mr. Stallman. Because your topic is free society, and I heard the news about Mr. Kim.com. Wants to
About who?
Mr. Kim.com.
Oh, him.
Yeah. He wants to build a political party which focuses on internet freedom and also the currency, virtual currency on internet. And I want to hear your opinion about that.
Well, Mega Upload required people to run non-free JavaScript code in order to use it at all. So, and of course, you'd be nuts to trust your files to a service like that, any service like that. So, his idea of internet freedom is apparently somewhat different from mine. Maybe there's something in common, you know, maybe he supports some causes I would also support, but I don't know. Oh, and his new site, Mega, also requires non-free JavaScript as far as I can tell, so I couldn't possibly use it even if I wanted to.
So thank you for your answer.
Hi. I think the main purpose for the companies is to make profit. So
The main goal, yeah.
the main goal. So I think I want to ask, what do you think is the best way to make the company willing to make free software so hard?
Well, first of all, we should learn to reject proprietary software, as I already do. So companies can make, no matter how much proprietary software they make, they won't have me as a customer. And if they won't have you or any of you as a customer, maybe they'll stop, which would be desirable. Basically, it's better to have a little of something that respects our freedom than a lot of stuff that takes away our freedom. Free software is a plus, and proprietary software is a minus. So we should try to reduce the amount of proprietary software that gets developed and increase the amount of free software that gets developed. Now, there are businesses that fund development of free software, and crowdfunding is being used to finance development of free software. These things work, so it's not impossible for people who are already getting paid to write free software. But meanwhile, what we have to realize that this is not just a matter of what people can get paid to do. There are jobs that are bad and that you shouldn't do. Writing non-free software is one of them. Drilling for oil under the Arctic Sea is another one. You know, there are a number of things that just shouldn't be done. And if a person says, well, but I need to make money, no, not that way. Don't do that.
But I think that's for people with strong belief.
Well, you should have strong belief.
Yeah, but I think the majority of people doesn't have that. So
Well, that's because the corporate media are leading them to focus on other values in their lives. So how can we change that? The more we talk about freedom as an important thing in life, and as a criterion for making our decisions, the more we can lead other people to care about the issue.
yes.
So I don't have a magical solution that's going to solve everything. What I can say is, if we go a certain way, we're leading people towards freedom, so let's go and lead as many people as will follow us.
Okay. I have a second question. That is, what's your opinion about big data? Because
It depends what the data is about.
Yes.
If the data is about how long it takes light bulbs to burn out, or which light bulbs are burning out, fine. I don't see any harm in collecting all that data and making light bulbs better and replacing them sooner and whatever. But if this big data is about people, it's dangerous, and it shouldn't be collected at all. We need to require digital systems to be designed so they do not accumulate masses of data about people.
Thanks for the great speech.
Oh, by the way, you spoke with the person who I couldn't understand, so did he explain his question to you? Could you ask me the question?
Not really. Let me get back to you.
Okay.
Thanks for a great speech, and it's Randall from Tsinghua University.
I can't hear you at all.
It's Randall from Tsinghua University, and I have two questions. And the first is, in face of the technology world will drive by capitalism and we innovated by Apple's iStuff or cloud service. So the free software kind of like a chasing dog, like we success in some desktop apps. And
I can't understand you. What's your point?
I mean, what's your view in the innovation of the technology world? What can free
I'm not
software
very
do?
interested. I am looking for freedom, not for innovation. I think freedom is more important than innovation. After all, innovation can be good or bad. Why do you think innovation will make your life better? Do you think you are going to get to decide which innovations to use? If you could decide which innovations to use, then you would reject the ones you don't like, and then there'd be some reason to think innovation would make your life better. But in fact, businesses decide which innovations to impose on you. So the only thing we can expect is that innovations will make their profits better. They won't make your lives better. Why should they? They're not being chosen based on their effect on you. So I don't think innovation is particularly good, not nowadays. Our political system is not such as to make innovation good for us. We would need more control over our own lives in order to expect innovation to be good. So I think that our society overemphasizes innovation as a goal because that goal distracts us from things that are more important, like freedom and community. Remember that democracy was once an innovation, and tyranny was once an innovation. Despotism was once an innovation. Innovations can be good or bad. So it's a mistake to elevate innovation into the goal. And a mistake to assume that innovation is necessarily good. If we want innovation to be generally a good thing, we must organize society to make sure it is generally a good thing. Which mostly means taking away the political power of business. In other words, restoring democracy, abolishing plutocracy and reinstituting democracy. That's what we have to do.
Thank you. And the second question is, what's your view of socialism, especially in 3 countries from the...
Sorry, I can't hear all the words. What's my view of socialism?
Yeah, for example, 3 countries from
Which
North,
countries?
from Norway or Denmark, their social... Is there a better place to evolve?
Well, better than we're, better than the US for sure. And the reason is that in Scandinavia, they take care of the poor people, whereas in the US, the poor people are allowed to starve or die, more or less. If they get sick, they die. Whereas in Scandinavia, actually in most civilized countries, or perhaps I should say in civilized countries, there's a national health service and people can get medical care even if they are poor. In the US, a lot of people can't. You know, if poor people get cancer in the US, they die. So, yes, that's good. I should point out that free software, the free software movement, is a combination of socialist ideas and capitalist ideas and anarchist ideas. A mixture of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stallman. My question is, in all of your this moment, what kind of mechanism or system you propose we can trust?
What kind of what system?
A mechanism or the system you propose we can
I'm
trust?
sorry, there's a word you're saying that I can't understand. What kind of what?
What kind of mechanism or system?
Oh, mechanism.
Yeah, mechanism, sorry.
Well,
yeah.
I'm not proposing a single, that question is so broad. I've proposed lots of things.
Okay.
Which one are you talking about?
Okay, let me make like in your speech, you don't trust the portable phone. Because it was...
Well, I know what portable phones today do.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is, we know it's been tracking all the time. That's true. But
Yeah.
if we cut off the, like what you say, who can see those records, but not just...
Oh, but
when
the
you
point is that's not good enough. And the reason is we know that governments like the US government will look at those records to find whistleblowers.
Yes, that's
So we
the-
have to protect the whistleblowers, and in order to do that, we have to make sure we can still talk to other people without the governments knowing who we talk to.
Yes, that's my question about, for all of this system, what will you propose that we
Well, a payphone is better. You put money in it and nobody knows who you are. On the other hand, if there's a camera on the street that recognizes your face, maybe that way they'll know who's talking to the payphone. You see, all these different surveillance systems can be used together, at least in principle, in the future. And we must make sure it is possible to talk to somebody without the government's knowing. It's not enough to say that the government has to follow rules in accessing the data, because the government can disregard those rules, it can make an exception, it can generate an excuse. You know, every time when they say the whistleblower is a criminal, that's making an excuse to look at all this data. So it's funny the way these lights are getting brighter and dimmer. Really strange. I wonder why that's happening. In any case, that's why it's not enough just to have rules about looking at the data.
Okay, so
We have to have rules about collecting the data in the first place.
So can I conclude it's the fundamental
I can't
is
understand what?
can I conclude your movement the fundamental is the anonymity.
That's one of the issues. Remember, I brought up 10 threats to our freedom in the digital society, and surveillance is one. In regard to surveillance, yes, the possibility of doing things anonymously is the central issue. And insofar as digital systems track and surveil people, and create dossiers about who's doing what, they eliminate the possibility for anonymous action.
Okay, allow me to have a second question. Just come to my mind is what your comment about the Germany and the Munich, they use the free software for the government?
Yeah.
And what those kind of movement will be expand to?
Well, it's a good thing. Now, they didn't move completely to free software, but they took a large step towards using free software, and every government should do this for the sake of its computational sovereignty. You see, if you lose control of your computing, that's your misfortune, and I hope you will refuse to let that happen. But if you use a non-free program, you are the one who is losing. And in most cases, you're the only one who is directly losing. There are exceptions. If you use Skype, then you're talking to somebody else who's using Skype. So this means if you use Skype, you're encouraging other people to use Skype, and that's bad. That means you're harming others. So I won't use Skype even for a minute on somebody else's computer, because that's especially bad. But still, for the most part, what you do when you're computing affects you. It's good or bad for you. But that's because you do your computing for yourself. You're the one who you hope will benefit, and you're the one who can be hurt. But a government agency does its computing for the people, not for itself. And therefore, if the government agency loses control of that computing, the people have been harmed. So the government agency has a duty to maintain full control of its computing, which means, for instance, don't use any non-free software and don't use SaaS. We have a page of recommended government policies towards software in gnu.org/philosophy/governmentfreesoftware.html.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Stallman. I would like to ask you a personal question. Do you believe in any religion?
No, I'm an atheist.
Okay.
For
I
scientific
think that makes
reasons.
sense because I feel that you don't trust anything you cannot see, you cannot modify.
Well,
So-
science can convince me of the existence of things such as neutrinos, which I can't see. And electromagnetic fields. Well, you know, I studied physics in college.
Yes.
I studied E&M, so I knew something, I remember some of it about electromagnetic fields and what they do. So it's not that I don't believe in anything I can't see. It's that I insist on a rational way of figuring out what exists and how it works. But this is a separate question from right and wrong. Fundamentally, my ideas of right and wrong come from my ability to empathize with other people. If I see somebody being oppressed, I feel pain. And I feel anger.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Dr. Stallman. The GNU project already held for almost 30 years. And I have one question for what's your view about how cooperate between the government and the people in the digital society in the future?
Well, it's, you know, when government's using free software, that's one example of such cooperation, because there will be private contributors to the free software, and the government can contribute when it wants to. The government can also do a very useful service by having people check the code for bugs systematically. The government has money to do that with. So I'm in favor of that cooperation in a general way. I don't think very hard about the precise details, because that's the sort of thing, if a government wants advice, I'll look for advice to give. But in the abstract, why worry about it? You know, I'll wait till an official says, what should I do?
Okay, thank you.
Now, speaking of religions, I've noticed there's some strange religious practices here. For instance, at the door of the house where I'm staying, they're burning incense to the mosquito god.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for the whole experience that we had today about FSF. So I would like to ask 2 questions. I like the idea that FSF stands for socialism, anarchy, and capitalism. So you told a very good idea how we can.
Well, actually, I should point out, it doesn't stand for any one of them. It stands for something which, it stands for the free software movement, and the ideas of the free software movement. Well, some of them come from capitalism, some of them come from socialism, and some of them come from anarchism, but we don't stand for any one of those completely. We only get some ideas from each of them.
So I want to focus only on socialism and capitalism points. You gave an idea how an artist can be paid instead of giving the companies a bigger share and then droplets to the artist. How can we motivate individual artists instead of participating with a firm, bigger firm? They can develop something of their own and
well, lots of artists do that. That's what artists normally do. There's no shortage of artists wanting to do art. So I'm just proposing systems to help support them while they're doing art. But no, these systems are additional systems. I see no objection to selling copies of your work, and I see no objection to having a performance and selling tickets to come watch the performance. I don't object to those because I don't see anything wrong in that. I'm not proposing to change that.
And secondly, I would like to ask, you mentioned that your kernel took 6 years to develop and...
well, it took 6 years to get a test version. It works, but it doesn't work all that well. And in practice, we're using Linux as the kernel. which is okay. There's no need to replace the free code in Linux with a different piece of free code. The problem with Linux is that parts of it are not free. These are the so-called binary blobs of firmware. How are we going to really solve that problem? We need reverse engineering. So that's why I'm trying to convince universities to teach reverse engineering. This is the long-term way to do something about that problem.
So we hear more of Linux and less of
What?
we hear more of Linux and less of
Well,
GNU.
that's just an error, because people are using Linux and GNU together and erroneously calling the whole thing Linux. Well, let's just fix that error, but yes, Linux is there. I'm not saying Linux is a bad thing, except for the binary blobs, it's free.
So it never occurred to you like we could use like remove the Linux kernel and use a better
We
kernel?
could, but that's basically saying, the thing is, that's just not bad, it's not good logic. You're proposing to do a very big job just to replace one piece of free software with another piece of free software, just to clarify the name people are calling something else. I mean, I'd be very happy if the GNU herd started working so well that everyone wanted to use it, but looking at the practical situation, we don't need to replace the free code of Linux. We need to replace the binary blobs.
Thank you.
Thank you. People are talking about Internet of Things now. Many people talking about that. So, is it bad, good, or
It's
neutral?
bad. The so-called Internet of Things means people want you to wire up the things in your house to the internet so they can snoop on you.
So, but it seems people in Taiwan will make many things about IoT. So
They what?
They want to do many, for example, ICs.
Many what?
IC.
I don't know what IC is.
Integrated
circuit?
Yeah.
Oh, what about them?
To support IOC.
Well,
So
certain
maybe
things are bad and they shouldn't be done, okay? The so-called Internet of Things is for suckers. If you're wise, you won't let any of your things be on the internet.
Okay. My problem is, my question is, if it happened, for example, maybe government decides some project to push things happen, to push.
I know governments can do good and bad things.
Yeah.
So we have to fight against the Internet of Things, and we can give as our reason that surveillance is unjust.
Okay.
Surveillance is oppression.
Okay, I got it.
Now, with the way mobile devices work today, they are spy devices. I just read today that Apple can get certain kinds of data out of an iThing at any time. It's a spy device. Now, many computing activities that could be implemented inside of the local computer, nowadays they work through a server. Why are they set up to work through a server? Because that's better for a company that wants to collect data about people. So, if these things have non-free software in them, then they're for suckers. And they will be snooping. And they'll try to convince you the snooping is okay because we've stated some limits about how we will use the data. And the limits, of course, include turning the data over to Big Brother whenever Big Brother wants it, but they don't talk about that very much. So if we want to be safe and free, we should make sure that the things in our house, just like the things on our streets, are not collecting any data about us.
Okay, hi, Mr. Stallman. I would like to ask your opinion on about the BSD license and the BSD ideology. What do you
Well,
think
first of
about
all, there are two different BSD licenses, and the difference is very important. They're both free licenses. So a program under any BSD license is free software. But those licenses are different because the old one is not compatible with the GNU GPL, but the newer one is compatible with the GNU GPL. So it's a real important thing not to use the old BSD license. Both of the BSD licenses are pushover licenses. That is, they're not copyleft. And this is a weakness. They don't do any wrong. They're both free licenses. They respect users' freedom. But although they are not wrong, they are weak. They fail to actively defend users' freedom. Copyleft is the way we actively defend freedom for all users. In most cases, it's a mistake to choose one of the BSD licenses because it's a mistake to use a pushover license. Now, there are cases where, for special strategic reasons, it's a good idea to use a pushover license. But when you're going to use a pushover license, the BSD licenses are not, neither of them is really the best choice. It's better to use the Apache 2.0 license.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the BSD ideology is a peculiar idea that says, basically, freedom means being allowed to become a slave. So with copyleft, we say nobody can be enslaved. Nobody can be subjugated through this program. This program must remain free. And the supporters of the BSD ideology say that's an injustice because it doesn't allow people to accept subjugation. And well, more specifically, it doesn't allow them to put our code into non-free programs with which to subjugate users. Well, I think they're missing the point about what's right and wrong. Non-free software is an injustice, and therefore there shouldn't be any. And by copylefting our code, we are saying you can't use our code to do that kind of injustice. If you want to distribute something with our code in it, the entire thing has to be free software. Meaning that when you pass along our code to someone else, you must pass along the freedom as well. There's a haiku that explains the position of the people who criticize copyleft because they want to be allowed to put our code into proprietary programs. Using GPL is encroaching on our rights to encroach on yours. Well, I'm glad the questions are over because this has been a long enough talk as it is. Okay.
You said that what's important is freedom and community, and I don't understand what you mean by community.
Oh, well, with free software, we encourage people to help others because we don't stop them from helping others. We say, you're free to redistribute copies to other people, and you're free to work with them in changing the program. So this is the community aspect. With non-free software is the enemy of community, because the non-free software owners say, you are forbidden to redistribute the software to him. You are not allowed to change this and help others with it. So non-free software attacks community. and we respect community.
Okay. It's so glad because we all know about something regarding open, free software. But tend to mix up with open or other terms. So you get a very direct interpretation and clarification. So but it's a long time for us. And finally, I think we should give Dr. Stallman a big applause.